All right, let's unlock a superpower everybody uses every day. I mean, who doesn't use language?
You got that right.
And specifically today, we're diving deep into the everyday kind of language, the words and phrases we use to describe our daily routines, like getting ready for work or school, that kind of thing.
It's really interesting how much we kind of give ourselves away just by the way we talk about even something as simple as brushing our teeth.
Right. And the source material that we're looking at today really gets that. It breaks down this daily routine vocabulary by different skill levels, from beginner to advanced, but it goes way deeper than that. It shows how the words we choose actually reflect our mindset and even where we're at with our fluency, right?
Exactly. Just think about it for a second. Like someone who's just starting out learning English might say, I eat breakfast.
Yeah.
But as they get more comfortable, more fluent, that might change to, I whip up a quick breakfast before hitting the gym.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same action, but the language is so much more vivid and really tells a story.
And that's what really struck me too, the way this source material organizes everything around morning, afternoon, and evening routines. It's like a roadmap of how our language actually changes throughout the day,
Such a good point. Yeah, it's so smart. I mean, for example, eat lunch is pretty basic, but if you bump that up to network over lunch, that brings a whole different level of intentionality to the table.
It does. It really does. The words themselves are like clues about how we approach different parts of our day.
Oh, sure.
So let's get started with those morning routines, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the shifts we see in the language? We go from a beginner level all the way up to, a more advanced level.
Well, I think when you're starting out, when you're at the beginner level, it's all about just those really essential verbs, right?
Yeah.
Things like wake up, get dressed, have breakfast, those sorts of things. I mean, it's functional, gets the message across, but doesn't really tell us much about the person or their experience, right?
Totally. It's just the bare minimum. It's like you're filling out a form at the doctor's office.
Exactly.
But then when we get to the intermediate level, that's where we start to see a little more personality come through. Right?
For sure.
Instead of brush teeth, maybe it's brush teeth for 2 minutes or use whitening toothpaste. All of a sudden, we get some detail.
Exactly. And those little additions can reveal a lot about somebody, right? About their priorities, their habits. Are they really all about efficiency or are they kind of more detail oriented? The language really gives us clues.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, but now we're getting to the part that I got really excited about, the advanced vocabulary. We start to see phrases like start the day on the right foot, or even recharge with a mindful morning routine. Now it's not just about what you're doing, but the feeling behind it, the intention. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And recharge is such a powerful word to use here because it really suggests that a morning routine isn't just a list of tasks to get through, but it's a way to renew your energy, It's a source of energy.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And, digging a little deeper here, start the day on the right foot. Yeah. It's not just some random saying.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That actually has roots going all the way back to ancient Roman superstition.
Really?
Stepping out with your right foot first was good luck back then.
Wow. That's so cool. See, even simple phrases, they can have these amazing historical and cultural layers,
It makes you wonder if those ancient Romans, did they have their own version of a power breakfast or something like that?
Probably. Maybe. Yeah. It's so interesting to think about how language has evolved and adapted over time.
But some core concepts, some things just never change, right?
That's true.
The desire for a good start to your day, that's a universal thing, know?
Absolutely. That's something really important to keep in mind as we go through all these routines. It's not just about the individual, but how the words reflect, broader cultural values.
That's a good question. Now I want to analyze everything I say.
Right. Me too.
Okay. Before we go totally meta here, let's move on to the afternoon routines. What kind of linguistic gems are waiting for us there?
Well, it's interesting to see how the focus shifts as the day goes on, right?
Yeah.
So in the morning, it's all about getting ready, getting energized. And then in the afternoon, the language starts to reflect how we interact with the world, especially in work or professional settings.
Right. It's we go from eat lunch to grab a quick bite to, like you said, network during lunch.
Exactly. And it's the pace picks up, the stakes get higher.
Yeah. It's almost like a video game or something.
Yeah, is it?
Level up.
That's a great analogy because it shows how our language has to adapt to our changing roles, the different contexts we find ourselves in.
It does.
Even eating is different. It becomes more strategic.
Totally. You're not just eating to live, you're eating to win. But, there's also this interesting thread of recharging that kind of runs through all the afternoon routines.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like phrases such as take a power nap or recharge with a walk. So we know it's important to keep that energy going.
Yeah, absolutely.
It suggests that we need these intentional breaks.
Right.
It's not just about pushing through,
Right.
You got to take a break. You know what I mean?
I think about my own afternoons and how often I say I'm going to power through this afternoon slump.
Yeah.
But what I really need is to recharge.
It's like there's this tension between what we feel like we should be doing and then what we actually need to do to thrive.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
And the language helps us kind of figure that out.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you think about your afternoon routine, what are some of the phrases that come to mind?
Well, I definitely catch myself saying catch up on emails way more than I should. I wish I could get rid of that one. But I also try to say, find my flow when I'm working on a project,
Yeah.
It's like acknowledging that productivity isn't always linear. Sometimes you have to find it.
That's a good one. Find my flow. I like that. So that kind of brings us to a crucial question here. How do these afternoon routines, how do they set us up for a successful evening?
That's a really good question. And actually, I'm already noticing some interesting connections between the way we talk about recharging in the afternoon and the way we describe how we wind down in the evening,
Right.
It's almost like a mirror image. In the afternoon, we're trying to keep that energy up, but then in the evening, it's all about how to restore it. The language totally reflects that shift.
Okay, so let's get into those evening routines. How does the language evolve as we get closer to bedtime? And what does that tell us about what really matters to us, our priorities and mindsets?
Well, like we saw before, at the beginner level, it's all about those familiar actions. Have dinner, watch TV, go to bed. It's all really simple and straightforward, and it's all about our basic needs, right?
Totally. It's like hitting the reset button after a long day.
Yeah.
But when we move up to the intermediate level, things start to get a little more intentional.
Yeah.
We see phrases like spend time with family or read a book or even practice a hobby.
Yeah, that's a really cool shift. It's like now there's this awareness of nurturing our relationships and spending time doing things that bring us joy and pursuing our passions.
Right.
It's about creating a more balanced, fulfilling life.
Yeah, so I bet those advanced speakers, they take that even further, right? What kind of language do we see when people are really intentional with those evening routines?
Yeah, you're totally right. Instead of just saying watching TV, you might hear something like disconnect from screens or engage in mindful relaxation.
Yeah.
And instead of just going to bed, it's prepare for a restful sleep. It's taking those basic actions to a whole new level.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like the language is guiding us to this more intentional and mindful way of ending our day.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really interesting question. How does the language we use to describe our evening routines, how does that affect how we sleep and even our overall well-being?
That is a good question. It's something I'm going to be thinking about a lot, I think, as we go through this deep dive. But for now, let's take a closer look at those advanced phrases for our evening routines, because I am so intrigued by that contrast between disconnect from screens and engage in mindful relaxation. What do you think the difference is there? Like, what's the significance of those two things?
Yeah, it's such a subtle but powerful shift. I think the disconnect from screens is kind of acknowledging that technology can really mess with our sleep. It overstimulates us.
Right.
And it's like saying that rest is more important. We need to create boundaries,
Yeah.
And then engage in mindful relaxation takes it even further. You're not just avoiding things. You're creating a sense of calm. You're being present. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that shows a deeper understanding of the connection between our mind and body.
It's funny. I'm feeling more relaxed just thinking about these phrases right now.
I know, me too. It's crazy how much of an impact language has on us,
Totally.
It reminds us that even little changes in the words we use can make a huge difference.
This is making me rethink how I talk about my own evening routine, for sure.
Yeah.
But before we go down that road, let's give our listeners a chance to think about this,
Yeah, let's take a breath here. Think about your own evenings, right? What are some of the phrases you use to talk about how you wind down, Do you find yourself using those words that are more mindful, more intentional, or are you more focused on just checking things off your to-do list?
That's a really interesting thing to think about because, sometimes the words we use, they reveal more about us than we think. That's what's so cool about this deep dive into this vocabulary. It's not just about learning new words. It's about understanding ourselves and how we navigate the world, right?
Exactly. It's really amazing how much our language changes as we become more fluent, you know?
Yeah, totally. It's like leveling up in a video game or something.
Right.
Instead of getting new armor, you're getting new ways to express yourself.
Exactly. And it's not just about sounding fancier or something.
Right. It's not about trying to impress people.
Yeah, it's about, you know, being able to really get your thoughts and feelings across with more, you know, more nuance, more precision.
For sure. And that's something I noticed in this source material too.
Right.
Like even the simplest, most everyday actions, we could describe them in totally different ways depending on how fluent we are.
Yeah, it's true.
Remember how we were talking about eating lunch before? It's like at the beginner level, it's just eat lunch. You're just hungry.
Yeah.
But when you get more fluent, it becomes grabbing a quick bite or even networking during lunch.
And that shift going from eating to networking is so interesting.
I know, right?
Because it shows how much more we understand about like social dynamics and professional etiquette, all that stuff. It's just built right into the language.
Yeah. Right. You're not just refueling your body, you're refueling your connections, your career, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not just about work either.
Right.
Even something like cleaning the dishes can change as we get more fluent.
Oh, for sure. Instead of just cleaning, you might say tidying up or organizing the kitchen, it becomes about more than just chores, you know?
Right. It's like you're not just doing chores, you're creating a space for yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of creating a space, I'm really interested in how this source material focuses on self-care.
Oh, yeah, me too. I thought that was so interesting.
It's there throughout all three routines, but I feel like it gets more intentional, I guess, as the skill level increases.
Yeah, it's woven into the language, for sure.
Yeah, like, you know, instead of just watching TV in the evening, it's reading a book or taking a relaxing bath.
Yeah.
It's all about recognizing that me time is important.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, as you get to that more advanced level, that's when the self-care becomes even more obvious, you know?
Right. Like people are really starting to own it at that point.
Yeah, totally. You see phrases like practice mindfulness or even engage in self-reflection or prioritize sleep. These things take effort and they're not always easy, you know?
Yeah.
But the language is almost like it's giving us permission to slow down, to take care of ourselves.
I love that.
I think it's a message that a lot of people need to hear these days.
Especially these days, right? Everybody's so busy and, you know, we forget about taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. It's so easy to get caught up in everything and forget about what we really need.
So as we're talking about self-care, it made me think about that word recharging that we kept seeing earlier.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
It was in all three routines, the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. But it had slightly different meanings each time.
It's true.
In the morning, it was like recharging with a cup of coffee.
Yeah, to get ready for the day.
Right, exactly. In the afternoon, it's recharging with a walk or something like that. And then in the evening, it's about disconnecting from screens or engaging in a relaxing activity. It's the same word, but it has all these different applications, you know?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It shows how even though we all need to recharge, we do it in different ways, right? We all have our own ways of doing it.
I wonder if our listeners have thought about their own recharging routine.
Me too. Yeah. Like, what are those moments for them?
Yeah, and how do they describe them, right?
Yeah.
Because even if we don't realize it, the way we talk about those routines, I think it tells us a lot about, you know, what we value, what we prioritize.
It really does. It's like a window into, you know, how we see ourselves, how we see the world.
Speaking of how we see ourselves, I'm curious to hear what our listeners think about this whole connection between language and mindset.
Me too. It's such a fascinating idea, right? I
mean, we've been talking about how our vocabulary can show where we're at with our fluency, how we approach self-care. I wonder if our listeners have noticed other patterns in their own language.
I know, right? Like, are there certain words they use that really reflect who they are or what their goals are, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, or how their language has changed as they've gotten older. Maybe their perspective on things has changed, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
It's such a cool thing to think about because language is so much more than just a way to, you know, pass along information.
Right. It's not just about, you know, getting the message across. It's how we express ourselves.
It's a way to show our identity. You know?
Yeah, totally.
It really shapes how we see ourselves in the world around us, you know?
It really does.
Which kind of brings up a really big question here. If language has the power to shape our perceptions, can we use it to create the experiences we want? Can we actually, like, make things happen with the words we choose?
Whoa. That's a big question. That makes me think about all those like really intentional phrases we talked about, like setting intentions, or even visualizing success.
Cultivating gratitude.
Right.
Those are all about shaping our thoughts and feelings with words.
Exactly. It's like using words as tools to create a more positive mindset.
Right. It's all about that inner voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And if we can train that voice to be more encouraging, to be more positive, that's got to have an impact on our actions, right?
For sure. It's like we're programming our minds for success just by choosing the right words,
Totally. It makes me think about this quote I read once. The words you speak become the house you live in. It's so true.
Oh, I love that. It really shows how much power our words have,
And it makes me wonder how our listeners are using their words, right? Are they being intentional or are they just letting things happen,
Yeah, like are they choosing words that support their goals and their values?
Right.
Or are they kind of letting those negative thoughts take over?
Yeah.
It's something we all need to be mindful of, right?
Totally, because language is such a powerful tool. It can really help us change our lives for the better,
Absolutely.
And as we go through this deep dive, I'm excited to see what else we can learn about how language connects to our everyday lives. Going through all these different phrases about our routines, I've noticed something kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's like a shift from focusing on just tasks to focusing on experiences.
You're right. I see that.
Yeah, like at the beginner level, everything's very task-oriented,
Yeah.
make the bed, eat dinner, go to sleep.
Right, like checking things off a list, just getting it done.
Exactly. But then we get to the advanced level, the language gets, more sophisticated, more about enjoying the process.
I like that, enjoying the process.
Instead of just having dinner, it's like enjoying a home-cooked meal or sharing a meal with loved ones. There's more feeling there, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's like we're appreciating the experience more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just about food either.
Right.
Like even work-related phrases, they change in the same way. At the beginner level, you might say work on a project. But at the advanced level, you're collaborating with colleagues or contributing your expertise.
Yeah, it's about finding meaning in what you're doing, not just getting it done.
And that makes me think about another really cool thing we've seen throughout all of this, mindfulness.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It pops up in all three routines, but it's really strong in that advanced vocabulary.
For sure.
We see things like take a mindful walk, practice gratitude, even engage in deep breathing exercises. It's like the words themselves are trying to get us to be more present, more intentional.
It's about slowing down, being in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to think about how much power our words actually have.
It really is,
I mean, they can change how we think, how we feel, even what we do. So as we wrap up this deep dive into all this routine vocabulary, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
Pay attention to the words you use.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Pay attention to how you talk about your routines,
Because it matters.
It really does, because those words, they're more than just descriptions.
They're like a reflection of who we are.
Exactly. They show our mindset, what we think is important, our whole approach to life.
So what you're saying is if we choose our words carefully,
Yeah.
we can change our lives.
I think so. Yeah. I think we can actually create the experiences we want just by being mindful of the words we use.
That's powerful.
It is. So to all our listeners out there, go out and write your own story,
I love that. Write your own story.
Choose your words wisely.
Yay!